You know, guys, Christian Parker is here and he's installing his own defensive scheme. And I was sitting there deeply going through everything about this scheme, just thinking about how Donovan Ezeiruaku fits into all of this. Because honestly, his rookie year numbers aren't that appealing at first glance. But if you actually sit down and dig into last year's tape, I mean, really dig into it, you start realizing that Ezeiruaku wasn't the problem. The situation around him was. So let me break down what was actually holding him back last year, how Christian Parker's scheme fixes exactly that. And then we need to talk about these Myles Garrett trade rumors that have the Cowboys linked again. Because here's what's wild. Ezeiruaku is being mentioned as part of the price, and that alone tells you everything about how this organization values this kid right now. What's up, Cowboys? Welcome to the NFL Playbook Cowboys. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. All right, so before I get into Christian Parker and what this new scheme means, I think we have to actually talk about what Donovan Ezeiruaku did last year, like really did, not just the box score version. Because if you only looked at the stat sheet, 2 sacks, you'd think he was just another rotational guy still figuring things out. But that's genuinely not what happened. This guy played over 600 snaps as a 21-year-old rookie, more than any other edge rusher on this team, and he was doing all of that on the worst scoring defense in the entire NFL. That's the environment he was thrown into. No support, no structure, defenses that just couldn't hold up, and somehow he's still out there grinding through every single snap. And here's something that didn't even come out until after the season ended. Ezeiruaku was playing through a hip labrum tear. Think about what that actually means for an edge rusher. Everything he does, the burst out of his stance, bending the corner, driving through contact, all of it runs through that hip. He was doing all of that, hurt on a defense that was getting carved up every week. His production dropped off noticeably over the final stretch of the season, and at the time, people were calling it a second half fade. Looking back now, that was a guy just refusing to come off the field while dealing with serious damage. He had the surgery after the season, he's on schedule for training camp, he'll be healthy, and that matters more than people are giving it credit for. Now let's talk about what he was actually putting up, because this is where it gets interesting. 36 pressures as a rookie. His PFF pass rush grade ranks second among all rookie edge defenders in the entire NFL. Not second on the Cowboys, second in the whole league among first-year players at his position. His pass rush win rate led the entire rookie edge class. He had at least 1 pressure in 15 out of 17 games. 7 games with 3 or more pressures. His overall PFF grade put him 38th out of 115 qualified edge defenders across the whole league. That is not a guy who's still figuring out how to play. That's a guy who was already making offensive linemen and quarterbacks adjust to him in year 1. Quarterbacks were legitimately speeding up when he turned the corner. Tackles were opening their hips early before the snap even happened because they already knew what was coming. So if he was winning that consistently, why only 2 sacks? Look, this is the part that I think most people just don't understand about how pass rushing actually works. Sacks don't happen because one guy wins his matchup on the edge. They happen when the whole pocket collapses at the same time. Last year, Ezeiruaku would beat his tackle off the edge, close in on the quarterback, and the quarterback would just step up inside because there was nothing collapsing the middle of the pocket. That extra half second, that tiny window of escape, that's all it takes. The ball gets out just in time, over and over. He was winning. The quarterback just still had somewhere to go. That's not an Ezeiruaku problem. That's a roster construction problem, and it was a real one. That's exactly why Christian Parker matters so much right now, because what Parker is building in Dallas fixes the specific thing that was neutralizing Ezeiruaku last season. You've got Kenny Clark and Quinnen Williams now working the interior of that defensive line. When those two are collapsed in the pocket from the inside, quarterbacks can't step up anymore. They can't climb. The middle closes like a trap, and they drift wider and later trying to find space. And when they drift wider and later, they're moving right into Ezeiruaku's pursuit path. That's not a coincidence. That's how the game is designed to work. Ezeiruaku was already generating pressure without any of that last year. Now add it, and the finishing starts following the winning. Then you put Rashan Gary on the other side of that line. Gary is an experienced edge rusher who demands real attention. Offensive coordinators can't just slide protection entirely to Ezeiruaku's side anymore because Gary is a legitimate threat on the backside. So now you've got Williams and Clark caving the pocket, Gary pulling attention away, and Ezeiruaku running at a tackle who knows help isn't coming. I mean, honestly, that's a completely different world than what he was surviving in last season. The scheme transition into a 3-4 base defense sounds like a bigger deal than it actually is to. He's still aligned on the edge, still rushing off the corner, still setting the run and reading pass. That's what he's done his whole career. The position title changed. His job didn't. What Parker actually gives him is structure and real pieces around him for the first time.
And look, his college career alone should tell you how this guy responds when the situation gets hard. In his junior year at Boston College, he had 2 sacks in 13 games after a breakout sophomore season where he led the Eagles with 8.5 sacks. People were genuinely starting to wonder if he was a one-year flash. Then he came back his senior year and led the entire country in sacks. He won the Ted Hendricks Award, consensus All-American. You don't do that without being wired wired differently than most people. He saw the regression, he saw the doubt, and he came back and put together one of the best individual pass rush seasons college football had seen in years. That's the same guy stepping into year 2 with a healthy hip, a real defensive scheme, and real pieces around him for the first time in his NFL career. Double-digit sacks wouldn't shock me at all, not even a little.
Now I'm going to get into the Myles Garrett trade conversation because this is where things get really interesting, and it connects directly back to how the Cowboys view Ezeiruaku right now. Albert Breer has again pushed the idea that the Browns should trade Myles Garrett, and he specifically mentioned the Cowboys as a potential destination. For context, Garrett is skipping voluntary OTAs, which honestly isn't unusual for him, but he also reportedly hasn't spoken with new head coach Todd Monken, which, I mean, that's a little different. There was also some frustration on his end about the Browns not keeping Jim Schwartz as head coach, so there's clearly some tension there. From a contract standpoint, a trade before June 1st doesn't really make financial sense for the Browns. The cap savings just aren't there yet, under $24 million with a net loss of $17 million if they move him before that date. But after June 1st, the math changes. The dead money drops significantly for 2026, pushes into 2027, and the new team would only carry a cap hit of around $9 million this year. That is extremely affordable for any team looking to add a generational pass rusher. The cash owed is real, $31.5 million this year, and it goes up from there, but from a pure cap management perspective, it becomes very doable after June 1st. Here's what I keep coming back to though. Breer mentioned the Cowboys specifically, and talked about the hometown appeal for Garrett, who is from Dallas. He also mentioned the LA Rams, the Eagles, and the Chicago Bears as potential options. But the Cowboys detail that really caught my attention is this. Ezeiruaku has been floated as a potential piece in a trade package, and you know what? That tells you something. That's not a throwaway name. Teams don't include their high-upside second-year edge rushers in trade talks unless they genuinely believe they have someone else who can fill that role, or unless the guy they're getting back is so rare that it's worth it. You know, the Cowboys have very little draft capital right now, a 1, a 2, a 3, and not a whole lot else this year. They're not going to win any bidding war purely on picks. That was ever really in the cards. So if they were going to be seriously involved in something like this, a young player like Ezeiruaku would almost certainly have to be part of the conversation. Now, does that mean they should do it? That's where it gets complicated. You'd be trading away a guy who I just spent the last several minutes telling you is about to break out, a guy who's healthy for the first time, stepping into the exact scheme that unlocks everything he was already doing. That's not nothing. That's a real cost. But then again, Myles Garrett is the best defensive player in the NFL. Last year, he put up 33 tackles for loss and 23 sacks on a team that wasn't good, on a defense where everyone knew he was the guy to stop. Those are video game numbers in real life. So I get why the conversation exists. I genuinely do. I just don't think the Cowboys end up being the team that pulls us off. Not with their current draft capital, and honestly, not when you understand what they're potentially giving up in Ezeiruaku if they make that call. But until that next option bonus gets paid, these rumors aren't going anywhere, and this is absolutely one to keep watching. Drop a comment, let me know what you think. Would you trade Ezeiruaku for a shot at Myles Garrett? I want to know where you guys land on this one.